over70.com. Join Reimagine Circle. And one of the benefits of membership is free participation at our online monthly programs. And plan to attend our first live symposium in LaGrange Park, Illinois, October 19th, 2024. We will celebrate 5 years, 300 episodes, and so much more. Will you be among the 150 attendees? See womenover70.com for more information.
And today we're delighted to be talking with Anne Burke. Anne, age 80, is the retired Chief Justice of the Illinois Supreme Court, and she says, "But I'm a gym teacher at heart." As a student, Anne underperformed academically and excelled in athletics, and these experiences inspired her in 1968 to create the Special Olympics, which 56 years later is flourishing in 182 countries. Mm-hmm. Anne completed her undergraduate degree through the Competency-Based School for New Learning at DePaul University, where she could focus her studies on what she cared most about. She attended law school as a married woman with 4 children, under 10. And Anne's law practice centered on helping vulnerable children and citizens. She spent 13 years on the appellate court, and retired from the Illinois Supreme Court after 16 years on that bench. Anne has returned to DePaul University as a non-degree seeking student to learn new subjects, from American history to philosophy to creative writing. And for Anne, the common elements, whether on the bench, the playground, or the classroom, are collaborating and making it fun. Welcome, Anne, to Women Over 70.
Oh, thank you, Catherine, very much. That was a beautiful introduction. I had to look around to see if it was me you were talking about.
It is you. So there's lots of things we want to cover with you today, Anne, but let's start with just a brief history about your early years in academics and athletics, because they were so important in shaping your work with Special Olympics.
Yes, and unbeknownst to me, all through grammar school and high school, I had suffered from dyslexia, which I still do, but I didn't know that until I was almost 50 plus years old. I just didn't do well in school, but I managed to pass everything, worked very hard. But the most interesting part of it is my parents urged me to do what I really liked to do, and that was sports and dancing and music and baton twirling. So I was able to really kind of feel good about myself. And I felt that other people in my class, grammar school and high school, obviously tended towards academics, but I was different. And I went towards the arts, music and other things. And I felt very good about it. But when my second year in high school teacher, Sister Henrietta, mentioned to me, what am I going to do after I get out of high school? It was a question no one ever asked me, not even my parents, because I was the youngest of 4, and my other siblings were gone. So I was kind of like an only child for 9 years. I said, I really don't know. And she just asked me what I'd love to do. And I said, twirl my baton, tap dance, swim, whatever. And she said, then you should be a gym teacher. Now, with that background, in the summer times, I always went to camp. I was a junior counselor at camps. I worked at the Park District as a recreation leader. And the Park District gave a scholarship to someone who wanted to go and be a phys ed teacher. Well, Sister Henrietta helped me with my test and my story, and I got the $500. But by my second year, the school moved to Downers Grove, and I had to drop out. So I dropped out of school.
And tell us a bit about your long-standing commitment to supporting children with learning differences.
That occurred as a result of my working for the Chicago Park District. In having taught normal children day camp and baton twirling and everything at a park in Chicago, the Park District decided to open the doors for the first time in the United States to children who were different, learning differences, and have a pilot project in 10 parks. And it was at a time in 1965 where children were in institutions or they were in their parents' home and closeted. I had never seen a child with learning differences. And at that time, we used the word retarded. However, the Park District was committed to it. And so 10 of us volunteered to go to camp at Southern Illinois University for 1 week to role play with people who showed us what people's learning differences acted like. And then all we had to do is adjust what we know about the sports we knew and the dancing we knew and the activities we knew to adjust to work with children. However, it was a little more difficult than that. Once I've had my first class, I had my whistle, and I was used to blowing my whistle and telling the children to line up on the blue line. However, these children, if you recall from 1965, weren't in school. They didn't know what the color blue was. They didn't know what lines were. So it finally clicked that they're really no different than any little kids. You have to teach them the very basics, how to line up, what circles are, what lines are, what colors are. So we started doing a holistic view of sports with drawing and coloring and painting and playing games and circles and all. And finally, my children learned all that. And each one of them was different in terms of what their mental capacity was and also their physical capacity. And I had to adjust to each child individually, but that was actually fun. We really had a good time. If a child never jumped before, it was really fun teaching them how to jump. And they really excelled and they wanted to play. Everything was a game in my mind with the children. We were very successful. So now fast forward to 1967, the people from the Park District, the president of the Park District, William McFetridge, and the vice president, Dan Shannon, who was a Notre Dame football player, came to my park, and we invited them to see the children. We thought that they should know what they were doing. And they, of course, were so taken aback by what they could do. And they wanted to advertise and do more because how many children were in Chicago at that time? And nobody knew. Nobody had any statistics. I didn't know. And even in our own program, we were keeping track of who we had, but we had no idea how many other children still lived in Chicago. We started advertising in the local newspapers. If you have a retarded child, bring them to the West Pullman Park, that kind of thing. And I had over 100 children in my program. And the others had almost that much. So they asked what could be done to advertise this in the greater Chicago area. And I said, do the same thing you do for normal children in the normal day camp at the end of summer. You have a big fun day at Soldier Field. We should have our own fun day at Soldier Field, which included running, jumping, throwing a ball, and other games and things like that. So that's what we did. But in the meantime, as I was planning it out, I wrote to Mrs. Shriver, Eunice Kennedy Shriver of the Kennedy Foundation. So someone suggested, Dr. William Freeberg from Southern Illinois suggested I write to her. She might be interested in funding some of the program, which she did. But she did it in a roundabout way. She had me come out to Washington. I sent her my proposal, and she looked at me and she said, it's totally unacceptable. Well, you can imagine. I'm 20 years old, a college dropout, and she tells me my proposal is unacceptable. But then she finished her sentence. It's unacceptable because it's only Chicago. I can help you get other states if you change your proposal. And that's what I did. And that's how the game started.
And what was it called? Special Olympics right from the beginning?
Yes, right in the beginning. And that's kind of an interesting, you asked that because that's a very touchy point with International Special Olympics. It wasn't until after the first games at the closing ceremonies that Mrs. Shriver told everybody that they now the Kennedy Foundation incorporated Special Olympics, National Special Olympics, and International. After we had coined the name, or this park district called it the Chicago Special Olympics. So they're still kind of like upset about the fact that we still use the words.
Do you continue to be involved? I know it's 56 years later.
Yes, in fact, last week I was out at West Wilmot Park. There is a gentleman who has been working with the production studio to do a film on the beginning of the games, and he wanted to look at the inside of the park. And so I went out there and took some pictures. There still is a program going on. Rosie St. George is running it. I saw some of I only saw one of my former students because they're all kind of old. I mean, some of them were much older than me, even when I started the games, but some of them were little, so some of them are still around. And so that was fun. And then the week before that, the law enforcement leg in the United States, actually it's around the world now, they have a run to raise money in every state. And that was a week ago, where the Sheriff Dart, he has our leg of it in the Cook County area, and I always open up that. So all the police departments are involved, and all the even the suburban police departments and the sheriff's office. So I'm still doing things.
Yeah.
However, I can't really do much with the children anymore, but I'm at all the events they ask me to go to.
It's an incredible living legacy that you have.
It is.
Quite
I have to pinch myself. And you know what's interesting too, Catherine and Gail, it's that it's nothing new. It's all it is a movement that a whole population universally were provided even to live. That same population was euthanized for years. No one, if a defective child was born or whatever, they were euthanized or put away. So it's a movement that every country did something with for people that weren't perfect in their eyes. Yes. And so this is the greatest movement, I think, between the 20th and the 21st century nationally. I mean, it's my own opinion, but it's because nobody has any downside to it. Right. Nobody's against it.
Yes, I would imagine no one's against it. You know, when we had our pre-interview conversation, and I was struck by how you made the link between your work with children and play and the Special Olympics and being a Supreme Court judge.
Oh, yes.
And then I'm thinking, and here's this baton twirling girl who ends up sitting on the bench.
I know. I am dyslexic. I mean, there I was. I take a long time to read. I'm a hard time to process things, but I'm very audible and I view things. And that's how I compensated all those decades. But the other link I think that is most fascinating is the core of me is children, and it always has been. And the recommendation to go back to school by my husband to get my college degree is that you have a lot to teach people, but nobody will pay attention to you because you don't have a college degree. That's why I went back. It isn't because I was delighted to go back to school and that was 3 little children at the time. But the School for New Learning let me focus on what I just did with the Special Olympics. And I was able to get some competency for the marketing that I did, for the collaboration I did. And all of that was because I learned to be on teams when I was a child. Collaboration, not getting everything you want, but causing others to work with you to improve things. The unacceptability stayed with me. You know, you write a paper and it's still unacceptable. You can do better the next day if you sleep on it. And that's been the core of me. And then getting the law degree was the other thing, is my ability to really help the special populations. And with my law degree became, so obvious that Ed sent me to school, and I was able to get through that too. Although I did have to promise one of my professors that I would never have a case with constitutional law. You should see the note he wrote me when I got on the Supreme Court. He said, I thought we had a deal here. I just barely passed constitutional law. However, I've done pretty well since then. I just needed a little encouragement. But the core of all of that is what fundamentally everybody I try to recommend, keep with. We all have loves and things we love, and we still need to nurture that and we have opportunities where we can nurture that project or whatever that is and get other people to feel the same way or to use their skills to help. And that's exactly what I did. It's like, encourage people. I made them feel guilty. I brought them out to Misericordia. You've got to help with this group of children. You have to get money. You have to help with Special Olympics. They can go to school now. They can get jobs. So it just is non-ending.
And what stands out for you? What else stands out for you about your experiences on the Supreme Court and being Chief Justice?
Well, it was COVID at the time. I mean, I just stepped on and then the COVID came. And we had to resort to Zoom. And I didn't flicker a second. I said, everybody has to be on Zoom. And I had weekly meetings with all the chief judges, all the judges. I was going to do a whirlwind of the state and meet as many people as I could in all the counties. We have 102 counties, and I wanted to meet as many of the people that worked on the ground. But instead of doing that, I did a weekly county. Every county had a Zoom call with me. I invited the sheriffs, all the legislators from that area, everybody. We had great Zoom calls, and I learned so much from the different 102 counties. Even the COVID isn't uniform in the state. I couldn't just push a button and say we're all going to you have to be wear masks and everything. Because down in Mount Vernon, they hadn't even heard of COVID yet, and we had it up here. So it's that kind of thinking and talking to the people where everybody was that I could put everything together and come up with a plan, a structure. When COVID hits and your public department, health department in your county says it, then it's time for you to go into this mode. And then there was, we don't all have broadband in our county jails, or we don't have broadband in our small little courthouses. Well, by saving money of not traveling and a lot of other things the court didn't do statewide, we were able to save what we called COVID grants. And we would give every county a broadband. We'd make sure they all could get in, because one public defender said he couldn't see his client. He couldn't email anything to him because he couldn't get into the jail. Well, we made sure that jail had broadband, and there was laptops for people. So it was such fun, to be able to get something done, have everybody work together. And as it turns out, we were also able to get things like the Safety Act passed statewide. We had other people realize that we could do trials on Zoom, and bring expert witnesses in on Zoom, because people couldn't pay for them. They had to come in from California. Like Bennett Leventhal is a psychiatrist out in California. We could have him in and teach the teachers and teach the judges, behavioral health issues. So we just had a great time. And that was momentous for my term as a chief. But as my daily life on the court was such a blessing, you have to picture that the courthouse was built in 1908. And it was built because our state is one of the few states that is divided into 5 judicial districts. So geography promotes or recommends and requires that the chief justices come from every county. So Cook, because it's a larger population, we have 3 justices. DuPage has 2 justices. Then there's the others have each one. So we are a geography diverse only in the United States court. And we all live together when we're in term. We have 5 terms a year. The 5 terms, each term consists of 2 weeks. So every January, March, May, June, and September, we move down to Springfield. And I bring up the building is because it was built in 1908. At the same time, the courthouse has on the 3rd floor suites for every one of the justices. You know, a bedroom, a washroom, and a sitting room for your desk. And we take our meals together. We become a real family. We have just, instead of arguing, you're not going to argue with somebody you're going to have breakfast with. You're going to just try to, you know, collaborate and talk about the issues. And we really got along. I mean, I really felt bad, but court it's been changing all along. We had 8 years solid when 8 of us were the same people. And we even went to Ireland together with our spouses. So, I mean, it is a really unique group of people that have been on the Supreme Court. And historically, Stephen A. Douglas was on the Supreme Court, and that's a story unto itself. James Shields, he was a senator and on the Supreme Court, and he's the only person who's in the Hall of Great People in the House in Washington that has represented as a senator in 4 different states. I mean, it's unbelievable. And he was on the Illinois Supreme Court. So, there's well-known people and people who really were unique to Illinois. And, Abraham Lincoln was not on the Supreme Court, but others were.
You, what year did you leave the Supreme Court?
2023. So the end of 2023.
Is this the way you're just described, living as a family and all? Has that ever happened again or before you?
It does. But, it depends on who people elect to the Supreme Court, because it takes individuals who can collaborate, who can say, oh, lighten up, don't be so serious. And you have to have some people on the court willing to do that. And if I don't say so myself, once women came onto the court, and the first was Mary Ann McMurrow, and she's an interesting story. But once she came onto the court, her 6 male colleagues had to change some of their habits. And, she didn't have to say too much, but maybe language or being mad at each other or whatever, they couldn't do it. And then came Rita Garman. And then it was more of the same kind of thing. Then by the time I got onto the court, Rita and I really co-conspired about a lot of things. And it became a lot more. And then, some of the men left the court and new people came on. And we really made it a point to advertise while we're judges that being on the Supreme Court takes a person that can collaborate. And when someone dies or someone leaves the court, they have an opportunity to appoint someone until the whole court does the appointing. But I could recommend somebody from the first district to fulfill my obligation until the next general election. So Mary Ann McMurrow, when she left the court, she chose me to take her spot, and the rest of the court agreed. When I left the court, I chose Joy Cunningham to replace me, and she just was elected for a full term. And then after 2 years, I was elected for a full term and a retention. So it behooves the court to find people that are good at what they do and can get along, because it is a really kind of a holy place. It is. And you look at the names of the people that have changed the law over the decades. I mean, we have put on plays. The Illinois Supreme Court Historic Preservation Commission have used DePaul University's theater school to reenact plays like Mary Todd Lincoln, her insanity trial. She was found insane under the 1875 Lunatic Act. But when we retried her, we tried her under today's mental health code, and we had Bennett Leventhal and Dr. James Kavanaugh, the forensic scientist, MD, being the brave talking experts. And what the jury found, who was the audience, is that Mary Todd Lincoln surely had a mental illness, but she could live on her own. She didn't have to be put away if she was on the right medication. And the same when we did Joseph Smith, reenacted his. So we could show how the progression of the law in Illinois changed to the better from an 1875 Lunatic Act to today's mental health code, what happens now. So it was an education. And that's what's happened all along. And I always took pride in helping make sure that we had a Historic Preservation Commission. And Justice Garvin and I got the legislature to do that.
Really, really interesting. Speaking of DePaul, you returned to DePaul.
Yes.
And you are a non-degree seeking student.
Yes. And I audit the classes. I didn't take a class this summer. I was just having too much going, but I'm registered for the fall, the philosophy of ethics, because I took philosophy the first class. So this is my sixth class now. I take one a quarter, and I just love it. They're all in person, so that's what I want, to listen to the students. And boy, are they smart.
And how do they interact with you?
Well, everybody asks that question, but nobody, I mean, really, they don't know who I am. There only one professor outed me in his class, and that was my creative writing teacher, Miles Harvey. He's a well-known author, and there's only 13 to 15 students in a class, but I wear blue jeans and my tennis shoes and sweatshirts and all to class, and in my socks cap. They all are very nice to me, and like I said, I don't really get involved in speaking at the class unless I'm really concerned that the students know something. I can't help myself. But first of all, I got outed by Harvey. And when I walked in the class, he said, "Shall I call you Chief or Anne?" I said, "Professor, you're not going to call on me. You're not going to call me anything. I'm not going to raise my hand, and I'm not going to answer your questions." He laughed. And I'm not turning in any papers. He said, "Okay, well, just sit and listen." I said, "Good, because, I spent 30 years writing legally. I won't be able to do anything creatively." And he said, "You'd be surprised." But anyway, that was that. But he was talking one time, giving an assignment to the students about find a place in Chicago that you don't know anything about. Now, mind you, these students are from out of town, good percentage of them. And they were to do history on it, take a picture of the landmark or whatever it is, and do the history, go to the recorder of deeds office and things like that and create a story on it. Mm-hmm. Make it up if you don't know what was on there. And he started talking about the lakefront. He started talking about, and he said, "Take a picture of the lakefront." And how did that stay? Nobody builds onto the lakefront. Well, I raised my hand, and I said, "Professor, it was James Cartwright in 1918 that wrote the decision on the Illinois Supreme Court using the term forever open, free, and clear, not permitting anybody to build on the lakefront." Well, he said, "Thank you, Professor." That's all I said. But I wanted the students to know the reason why it was forever open, free, and clear.
Yes. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So is there anything in the few minutes we have left that you would like to say about your family, your personal life?
Well, yes, my husband and I celebrated our 56th wedding anniversary just last week. We dated for 4 years before while he finished DePaul Law School and I was working at the park. We got married in 1968, so that was a big year for us. And we started adopting our family. We weren't having children, so we have, out of our 5 children, we have 4 adopted children, 1 African American, and we have had the best marriage and life with our children and enjoying each other, so recommending to each other. As even though we lived kind of separate lives, which I really don't mean in the strict sense of the word, but we urged each other to do what they wanted to do, and helped with that, and made sure I had babysitters and everything. And in fact, one of the wonderful artists from Chicago, Richard Hunton, I'm sure you've heard of it. He is a world-class sculptor. He grew up in Inglewood, and he lived down the street from DePaul, but I know that a lot of his work has been distributed to DePaul. He just recently passed away. He said once to me, we were very good friends, the goal in life is to wander, wandering through the unknown in a search of the unknown, all the time leaving your mark. Now that's what he thinks we should be doing. No matter what it is, we should search for things that we want to do and leave a mark doing it. So I think that is probably best says about what I did, because I've done a million things. I mean, I was on the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops review board. I was co-chairman, then chairman.